You've promised not to cut Medicaid, said this is all just targeting waste, fraud, and abuse. Are you saying that the estimated 11.8 million people who could lose their health coverage, that is all waste, fraud, and abuse?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's going to be a very much smaller number than that, and that number will be waste, fraud, and abuse. And
show up today, show up tomorrow, show up this week, show up next week, show up this year, show up next year, show up until we end this national nightmare in the United States of America and continue our march toward a more perfect union.
This is about tax cuts for the wealthy that will blow up the deficit by $5 trillion.
America is standing on the edge of a deadly collapse. Trump didn't just lie, he triggered a silent war on the poor, the sick, and the working class. Healthcare stolen, jobs wiped out, prices exploded. What's coming next is even worse, and in this video, we expose it all with his own words.
President Trump, you're either being lied to or you are lying to the American people, because this bill represents, in the text of this bill, the largest and greatest loss of health care in American history. 17 million Americans will lose their health care on this bill, not undocumented people, not quote unquote the disgusting term illegal, but 17 million Americans will have their health care cut from this bill.
He stood at rallies and smiled through his teeth, promising to protect your health care. He said no one would lose coverage. But now we have it in black and white. 17 million Americans will be stripped of their health care under his so-called beautiful bill. That's not undocumented immigrants. That's not criminals. That's you. Seniors, veterans, waitresses, teachers, factory workers, all thrown out like yesterday's news. And Trump? He shrugs. This is not just bad policy. This is betrayal on a national scale. This is a man who used the promise of protection as bait, only to yank away the safety net when America turned its back. We're not talking about waste or fraud. We're talking about real mothers, real children, real human lives. This is the largest healthcare robbery in U.S. history, and Donald Trump didn't just sign off on it, he celebrated it. No empathy, no plan, just raw political greed. The man who once promised the best healthcare in the world has now become the reason millions will wake up tomorrow without any.
Experts from both red and blue states warn the damage from the deep cuts to Medicaid in President Trump's spending bill could extend far beyond rural hospitals, impacting vital services like preventative care, food programs, and forcing essential rural clinics to shut down, putting lives at risk.
These aren't partisan talking points. This is a medical emergency. When you cut Medicaid, you don't just cut budgets, you cut people's chances of surviving. In small towns and farming communities across Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, and rural Pennsylvania, hospitals are preparing to shut their doors. There won't be any ER to rush your child to when they collapse. No doctor to diagnose your father's cancer. No nurse to deliver your grandchild. Healthcare deserts are becoming America's new normal, all thanks to a president who thinks tax breaks for billionaires matter more than ventilators for babies. These rural health centers are the only option for millions. Shut them down, and you don't just deny access, you sign a death certificate. It's the elderly, the poor, the disabled who will suffer first. But make no mistake, this will come for the middle class next. Trump's defenders say it's about reducing fraud, but the data doesn't lie. These are real families losing real help, and the cost of emergency care skyrocketing after preventive care vanishes. That's not saving money. That's setting a financial time bomb. We're watching our healthcare system collapse from the inside out, and the man in the White House is holding the sledgehammer.
According to the vice president, this says the bill will leave more than 15 million people in the U.S. without health insurance, according to CNN's analysis of previous Congressional Budget Office numbers and the updated bill text. So,
let that number sink in. 15 million Americans. 15 million is not an estimate. It's a verdict, and Trump delivered it with a smirk. While families are left begging insurers, while kids miss doctor appointments, while diabetics ration insulin, Trump cheers this as a victory. He called it a win for immigration enforcement. He called everything else, your healthcare, your dignity, just minutia. Are we just noise to him? Are our lives just footnotes in his pursuit of power? A president who thinks millions losing coverage is immaterial doesn't deserve to lead. This wasn't a tough choice made in a crisis. This was a cold decision made in comfort. He had options. He had advisors. But he chose this. He chose to sacrifice 15 million people, many of them the same blue-collar Americans who believed in him, just to score a political point and cut taxes for corporations. And when confronted, he didn't even try to hide. He said, it's going to be a much smaller number, mostly waste, fraud, and abuse. Really? So the single mom working 2 jobs is fraud? The elderly couple in Kansas? The cancer patient in Detroit? According to Trump, you're all just abuse of the system. That's the insult. But the injury? That's what happens next, when millions are left to suffer in silence. This isn't reform. This is theft. This is cruelty repackaged as policy. This is a full-scale attack on America's promise to its people, and Trump is leading the charge. And this is just the beginning.
The cap on that is $25,000, while you're jacking up taxes on people who make less than $50,000 across the United States, while taking away their SNAP, while taking away their Medicaid, while kicking them off of the ACA and their health care extensions. So if you're at home and you're living off tips, you do the math.
What kind of president builds a government that crushes the same people who serve it? Trump promised to fight for the working class. But now, his signature bill jacks up taxes on Americans making less than $50,000 a year, people working 2 jobs, surviving on tips, living paycheck to paycheck. While billionaires get loopholes, the poor get tax hikes. While Elon Musk gets breaks, your local waitress gets squeezed. SNAP is ripped from her kids' mouths. Medicaid is pulled from her sick father. ACA is gone, no backup, no mercy. And here's the most sinister part. It's all hidden in fine print. While Trump tweets about victory, the real numbers tell a story of economic warfare. This isn't about budget balancing or fraud control. This is sabotage, targeting the lowest incomes, the most fragile families, and stripping them of basic dignity. When your president signs a law that makes it harder for you to feed your baby or buy diapers, he's not your leader, he's your enemy. And while the poor suffer, Trump's rich friends pop champagne and private jets. That's not patriotism. That's economic cruelty.
The nearly $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, which could leave nearly 12 million people without health insurance. It's according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Of course, not passing the bill leaves the Trump administration without a signature policy achievement. After all, it was called the One Beautiful Bill Act. Team Trump has told Republicans that failing to pass the bill is not an option. Many of the Republican holdouts met with Donald Trump today.
$1 trillion. That's not a typo. That's how much Trump's bill aims to slash from Medicaid. And with that, 12 million Americans are pushed out into the cold. These aren't abstract numbers. These are elderly patients on oxygen, children with asthma, veterans with PTSD, cancer patients halfway through chemotherapy. What kind of nation, what kind of man calls that progress? Trump's defenders call it responsible spending. But there's nothing responsible about sacrificing the weak for Wall Street's gain. These cuts aren't brave, they're cowardly. Real courage would mean taxing billionaires fairly, closing offshore loopholes, making hedge funds contribute. But Trump doesn't touch them. Instead, he comes for the disabled, for single mothers, for seniors on fixed incomes. Why? Because they can't fight back, because their votes are taken for granted, because in Trump's America, if you're not rich, you're disposable. This is a $1 trillion moral failure. And let's be clear, once these 12 million lose coverage, the hospitals still get crowded, but now no one can pay. That's how you bankrupt entire counties. That's how you collapse a healthcare system. It's not a policy bill, it's a ticking bomb, and it's already been signed.
The SNAP benefits. SNAP, of course, is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as food stamps, and some big changes were made on that the House is not finding palatable, as well as Medicaid changes. So yes, there is history that the Senate always jams the House, so there's reason to believe that could happen again in a president's party. However, many House members are very resistant to some of these changes. So
food is not a luxury, it's a right. But Trump's bill treats it like a reward for the wealthy and a punishment for the poor. The same legislation that hands billions in tax cuts to corporate giants also shreds the SNAP program, a lifeline for over 42 million Americans. Children, disabled individuals, low-income workers all now face empty plates, colder winters, and tighter belts, while billionaires smile in boardrooms. And still, some in Congress hesitate. They say the bill is hard to swallow. You know what's harder to swallow? Hunger. Ask the families who rely on SNAP to survive. Ask the parents who now have to choose between rent and groceries. Trump called this bill great for everyone. He lied. He knew exactly who it would hurt. and he pushed it anyway. That's not poor leadership, that's deliberate harm. They tried to rush this bill before July 4th, a holiday meant to celebrate freedom. Yet Trump's bill chains millions in poverty. This wasn't about fixing America, it was about feeding the ultra-rich and starving the rest. SNAP was never the problem. Trump's priorities are, you can't wave a flag with one hand while ripping food from a child's plate with the other. Trump didn't reform the economy, he weaponized it. He didn't fix the budget, he emptied your fridge. He didn't protect your family, he sacrificed it. All to give tax breaks to people who already have more than they can spend in 10 lifetimes. And if this doesn't wake America up, what will?
This bill is a deal with the devil. It explodes our national debt. It militarizes our entire economy, and it strips away healthcare and basic dignity of the American people for what? To give Elon Musk a tax break and billionaires the greedy taking of our nation. We cannot stand for it, and we will not support it.
They called it the one beautiful bill. But behind the glitter and slogans hides the truth. This bill is a billionaire bailout dressed in patriotic words. While Trump's supporters struggle to pay for prescriptions and groceries, he hands tax breaks to Elon Musk and the ultra-rich. Yes, billionaires who already dodge taxes with loopholes are now getting bonus discounts, while the people who built this country with sweat and sacrifice are being told to tighten their belts. There is no economic emergency for billionaires. Their wealth exploded during the pandemic. They bought yachts, islands, rockets. But Trump still thinks they need more, and he's making you pay for it. This isn't about economic growth. This is about economic theft. Every dollar ripped from Medicaid, from food stamps, from working families, is funneled upwards to billionaires, who already control more than half of America's wealth. This isn't trickle-down economics. This is flood-up robbery. The working class is being drained to fund luxury for the elite. Trump promised to drain the swamp. Instead, he fed it champagne. America first. No, this is billionaires first. And everyone else can fend for themselves.
Maura, very early in this process, someone said something to me that distilled the axis on which Congress is making its decisions, which is, what are the rest of us willing to sacrifice in order for millionaires and for billionaires to get these massive tax cuts? And it does seem to me that that point has broken through with American voters. You've seen all the same polling that I've seen on this bill. But
that question should haunt every American tonight. What are you sacrificing? Your health care? Your child's school lunch? Your job? Also, that someone who owns 10 homes and doesn't know the price of bread can get another tax deduction. Is that the America you signed up for? The numbers don't lie. Only 17% of Americans support cutting Medicaid, just 11% support cutting SNAP. But Trump didn't care. He ignored the people and rewarded the powerful. And while he tours the country shouting about patriotism, his policies betray the very core of American values. We're not a nation that bows to billionaires. We're not a country that lets children starve while CEOs collect subsidies. Trump said everyone would benefit, but the math is brutal. A family making $40,000 a year will lose healthcare, food benefits, and maybe their job. A billionaire, meanwhile, will save millions in tax cuts. That's not sacrifice, that's systemic abuse. And Trump's smiling through it, tweeting like a king, while the country crumbles beneath him. He has turned policy into profit for himself and his donors. And every time someone claps at his rallies, they're cheering for their own suffering, not realizing they're paying the bill for his greed.
Don Bacon from Omaha, from your home state of Nebraska, on the show yesterday. And he did not seem convinced that the Senate changes to Medicaid were good ones, that his more moderate, for want of a better term, group of House Republicans would embrace. Take a listen.
Even some Republicans can't stomach the truth anymore. Rural hospitals, the lifeline for small towns, are shutting down. Family farmers, the backbone of America, are getting crushed under the weight of Trump's policies. And still, the president dares to claim this bill helps everyone. He calls it unity, but all it unites is suffering. Trump pretends to fight for middle America, but the facts expose the lie. Rural communities once loyal to him are now facing an avalanche of closures, bankruptcies, and unemployment. A farmer in Nebraska doesn't need a Twitter slogan. He needs access to a hospital. He needs subsidies that help him grow food, not billionaires who want to buy farmland just to build golf courses. Don Bacon and a handful of Republicans spoke up not because they're heroes, but because even they couldn't hide from the disaster this bill unleashes. When hospitals close, people die. When Medicaid disappears, addictions rise, diseases go untreated, children suffer in silence. This bill is a death sentence for small-town America, signed with a gold pen and sealed with Trump's grin. America First meant nothing. It was just a sticker he slapped on a scheme to enrich the top 1%. The real slogan should be everyone else last. He told you he loved America, but he sold it to the highest bidder. He told you he cared about workers, but he robbed them to reward the rich. He told you he'd protect your future, but he mortgaged it for a billionaire's third mansion. That's not leadership, that's betrayal.
No sales tax on silencers. Really, folks? We want to make silencers more plentiful in this country at the behest of somebody like the representative who owns gun stores? Conflicts of interest abound. The taking away of health care. Rural hospitals will suffer. I think of nursing homes. My own in-laws in their final years were in a very humble nursing home, supported by Medicaid because they had worked hard their whole life.
Fear not policy, not principle ruled the chamber. Lisa Murkowski admitted it. She voted yes, even though she hated the bill, even though it ripped healthcare from her own constituents. Why? Because she was afraid to go against Trump. That's not leadership, that's submission. We don't elect representatives to bow their heads. We elect them to protect the people. But under Trump's shadow, even seasoned senators become pawns. They sign off on disaster just to avoid his wrath. This is how democracies crumble, not with tanks in the streets, but with cowards in Congress. Murkowski isn't alone. One by one, they lined up to obey, not because the bill made sense, but because Trump demanded loyalty over logic. They know it's wrong. They know it hurts seniors, veterans, and working families, but they still vote yes. Why? Because they're scared of a tweet, scared of Trump's base, scared of losing re-election. But here's what they should really fear: the people, the mothers who can't get insulin for their kids, the factory workers whose jobs vanish, the grandmothers who now face eviction because of food benefit cuts. That's who they betrayed. Not Trump, America.
You've promised not to cut Medicaid, said this is all just targeting waste, fraud, and abuse. Are you saying that the estimated 11.8 million people who could lose their health coverage, that is all waste, fraud, and abuse?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's going to be a very much smaller number than that, and that number will be waste, fraud, and abuse. And if you look, they took a much more liberal stance on the Medicaid situation than they could have.
This is what gaslighting looks like. Trump stood in front of the press and twisted the truth like a magician. First, he promised not to cut Medicaid. Then, he signed a bill that slashed it so deeply that 15 million people were set to lose coverage. And when called out, he waved it off as fraud, as if the struggling single mother or a disabled war veteran were just imaginary waste. He couldn't even defend it with conviction. He danced around numbers. He shifted blame. He treated 15 million Americans like statistics instead of human beings. That's the mark of a man who knows he's guilty, but refuses to accept the consequences. He's not just lying, he's insulting the intelligence of every voter in this country. And yet the GOP backed him anyway. Not one stood up and called it what it was: a betrayal. They stayed silent, hoping the storm would pass. But this isn't a storm. This is a man-made disaster. And silence makes them accomplices. Let's be clear. 15 million Americans losing health care is not collateral damage. It's not political strategy. It's human suffering caused by the man who promised to protect them and the party too weak to stop him.
This is about tax cuts for the wealthy that will blow up the deficit by $5 trillion. Take a look at these volumes. As I said, why would anyone vote for Trump's terrible, big, ugly?
$5 trillion. That's the price tag of Trump's betrayal. The same man who ran on fiscal responsibility just lit the national debt on fire. And for what? Not for teachers or firefighters, not for veterans or infrastructure, but for billionaire tax cuts and corporate loopholes. Trump didn't just lie to his base. He robbed them. He told them America was broke, then gave away trillions to the rich. And Republicans let it happen. They raised the debt ceiling not for emergency relief, but for vanity politics, and the result? A deficit that will haunt future generations, while today's families struggle to survive. This isn't economics, it's corruption, and the GOP, once the party of small government, has now become the party of big lies, big debt, and big betrayals. They sold out their voters for a handshake from Trump and a donor dinner at Mar-a-Lago. What's worse, they know it. They admit it in private. They whisper concerns behind closed doors, but in public, they raise their hands, cast their votes, and watch America drown in debt and despair. That's the cost of loyalty in Trump's world. And it's the people who always pay the price. They didn't vote their conscience. They voted their fear. They didn't protect America. They protected themselves. And while Trump tweets in gold towers, Main Street burns with broken promises.
Show up today, show up tomorrow, show up this week, show up next week, show up this year, show up next year, show up until we end this national nightmare in the United States of America and continue our march toward a more perfect union.
This isn't politics anymore, this is survival. The streets are quieter, but the pain is louder than ever. Families that once dreamed of homeownership now dream of just keeping the lights on. Seniors skip medication. Children go to school hungry. And the man at the center of it all, he's laughing, golfing, and bragging about winning. But the American people are waking up slowly, fiercely. And this time, they won't be fooled by the red hat or the golden slogans. The call to show up isn't just about elections, it's about reclaiming your voice. About remembering that we are the ones with power, the working class, the nurses, the truck drivers, the teachers. We are not side characters in Trump's corrupt fantasy. We are the main characters of America's next chapter. Ending this national nightmare means ending the silence, because silence is the oxygen that feeds tyrants. Trump thought he could rob us quietly, but now millions are speaking up from Capitol Hill to cornfields saying, no more. Not one more hospital closure. Not one more child without food. Not one more billionaire tax break at the cost of a human life.
She's up till 2028. So
well, that's why she gave.
And she did give Alaska something, but she did say it's not good enough for the rest of the nation, and we all know it.
So vote no. But it's also why you guys lost.
I think the point,
because she is up.
But the point needs to also be made here that we are staring down the barrel of the largest tax increase in decades. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. These are also huge things that kind of get lost in the shuffle.
And most billionaires will get massive
Everyone
tax.
gets massive.
Let's call it what it is, a legalized heist. This bill wasn't written for America. It was written for hedge fund managers, oil executives, and CEOs who fly private while pretending they care about freedom. Trump didn't just shift money, he shifted pain. He took relief from the poor and handed comfort to the rich. That's not policy. That's greed in a presidential suit. This transfer of wealth is historic not just in scale, but in cruelty. We're watching the largest redistribution of money from the working class to the ultra-wealthy in modern history, all while being told it's for our benefit. That's the scam. They wave the flag while stabbing the people beneath it. And the most disturbing part, they know exactly who it will hurt: the elderly, the disabled, the sick, the working poor, the most vulnerable, those who need government the most, not the least. And Trump, he downplays it, dismisses the numbers, gaslights the facts, because in his world, truth is a threat. We've reached a crossroads. One path leads to silence, to submission, to a country ruled by money and manipulated by fear. The other path, our path, leads to justice, to dignity, to an America that works for everyone. But we must choose it, loudly, relentlessly.
The nearly $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, which could leave nearly 12 million people without health insurance. That's according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Of course, not passing the bill leaves the Trump administration without a signature policy achievement. After all, it was called the One Beautiful Bill Act. Team Trump has told Republicans that failing to pass the bill is not an option. Many of the Republican holdouts...
Let that sink in. It's cheaper to feed someone for a year than to hospitalize them for 2 nights. But Trump doesn't care, because he's not trying to save money, he's trying to save face. And the consequences? Real people, real deaths, real debt. Organizations that provide food for the critically ill are being gutted by his cuts. Medicaid, which helps fund those services, is on the chopping block. So instead of saving lives and dollars, we're choosing to starve and hospitalize all in the name of political theater. What kind of president sees this math and still signs the bill? One who never cared about the numbers, only about the donors. One who sees public health as a nuisance and human life as expendable, when charity groups have more compassion and efficiency than the government itself. You know something is rotten. At the top, this is more than failure, it's intentional destruction. It's building a nation where profit matters more than people. And if we let it continue, we won't recognize this country in 10 years, because the soul of a nation isn't measured by its stock market, it's measured by how it treats its most fragile. We've seen what Trump gave the rich. Now ask what he took from you. Healthcare, jobs, hope. He's building a golden empire on the backs of working Americans. But every empire built on lies eventually falls. And when it does, let it be the people, not the powerful, who rise.